Everybody's joining in.
Super. Okay, folks are slowly coming into our webinar. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on deploying enabling technologies in supply chain. We're going to give a few more minutes for the rest of everyone to join us today. And so while we're waiting, why don't we share a quick video with all participants, and then we'll get started with our webinar this afternoon promptly thereafter. Why don't we move to the next slide and share the video?
One of the values that I see from a Bird Construction view, as far as supporting Supply Chain Canada, is just the vast array of individuals that we attract and different business units. We have owners, we have constructors, we have a wide array of suppliers, and then also just the ability to attract new and upcoming talent into our industry as well, to help support our industries, but not only that, also the economies as we work on trade and the different logistics and things that come with supply chain, as well as procurement across not only Canada, but into other countries as well as the US.
Super. Thank you for sharing that, guys. This was a recent conference that we've had back in October, and those were some of the highlights from the conference itself. So I thought it was sort of great to share some of the conference with all of you. Hopefully, many here were able to attend the conference, and if not, hoping that you can join us for the national conference, which will be happening next year in June in Calgary, in fact. So super excited to bring that forward as well. Okay, welcome everyone to our webinar on deploying enabling technologies in supply chain. My name is Alan Toe, and I'm the President and CEO of Supply Chain Canada West. Excited to be here to be the moderator of this webinar. Today, we'll be exploring how to effectively implement enterprise resource planning, ERP, source-to-pay solutions, and other pivotal technologies that can transform supply chain management. As digital transformation reshapes the business landscape, enabling technologies are becoming essential for supply chains of all sizes. Now, a recent study revealed that over 80% of North American companies are investing in digital supply chain technologies, with global ERP markets alone projected to reach nearly $50 billion by 2028. It's interesting when I went out and tried to pull in some of this research, the number varies quite a bit depending on the source, but directionally the number is quite significant and large overall. So I think directionally it's a significant investment by companies across the globe. This rapid adoption reflects a growing recognition that today's supply chains need to be agile, it needs to be data-driven, and it has to be highly connected in order to remain competitive. Yet, we know that deploying these technologies isn't without its challenge. We know many organizations struggle with integrating new systems, ensuring early adoption, and maximizing the value of their investment. So with that, we're so excited to have Chris Mabley join us today. So we'll flip to the next one to address these challenges, offering practical insights and best practices for deploying ERP, source to pay, and other critical tools effectively and also sustainably as well. Chris has over 2 decades in the energy sector and has worked on many supply chain transformation and business process optimization projects in his career. As a fellow practitioner, he has worked on projects to streamline and enhance supply chain execution with smart processes and innovative technology. And in all of my engagement with Chris, I find him to be a passionate individual who cares about the transitioning projects to their success so that they have lasting operational excellence and performance as well. And like many practitioners in this space, and some of you out there can relate, Chris also wears the scars of past technology implementation and is here to share some of the lessons learned and practices for success. So Chris, welcome to our webinar. I want to remind all participants that this session today is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to all of you for 30 days after this session. Additionally, a copy of the presentation will be sent out to all of you. I want to remind folks too that if you have questions, please use the Q&A functionality in Zoom, and we'll address as many of your questions as possible. If we can't get to your question, which there is a high risk of that happening, we'll get those questions answered and we'll share the response with all participants. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Chris to talk about enabling or deploying enabling technologies in supply chains. Chris, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and breaking bread with us, as it were, over the lunch hour. Appreciate your time and commitment to your supply chain. So the path for us today and what I'll endeavor to talk about is we'll start with looking at the world that we live in and some of the external factors that impact our supply chain. We'll look forward to some of those triggers for transformation. What are those things that are poking us to compel us to consider change? Once we've considered that change, making a decision to move forward, we'll try to understand how to get where we're going. What does that end game look like? And then we'll talk about launching the adventure and how we go about executing our transformation, our technology projects in the most efficient manner. I'm going to focus in on source to pay. I'll make a compelling reason why we'll look at that today, but how to succeed with source to pay is a theme here. And then I'll talk about answering the question, are we transformed or are we continuously transforming? We'll argue that we'll play the infinite game. And then I'll leave you with some key takeaways and hopefully once more some time to answer questions. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. So as supply chain leaders, we're all compelled to monitor both internal and external factors in our environment. We're not immune to world-changing events, and certainly we've got a plethora of those on the screen. Any of you aware that we've got a US presidential election today, hopefully coming to conclusion? Might not know the results today, but hopefully shortly. But that has us thinking, for example, about what does that climb look like in North America? US, depending on outcomes, become a little bit more protectionist, a little bit more US first. Are they going to think about opening up the Canadian-US-Mexico agreement once more and really dive into what free trade looks like? In terms of our global economy, we're all impacted by the plethora of global conflicts, starting to disrupt our supply of goods and services, starting to disrupt the flow of energy across the globe. From an environmental perspective, each one of us is likely touched upon. How are we managing our carbon footprint? How are we looking at technologies that will battle climate change? We're starting to think about more and more each day about the greening of the supply chain, and where we look for suppliers to adopt renewable energy, manage their carbon footprint in a more tangible way than ever before. And in terms of the social side of things, a few ideas there, not least of which is immigration. We've all heard about our aging population in North America, and how we look to battle some of that decline in our population is by upping our levels of immigration. And some would argue we've done so to combat worker shortages in a way that's unsustainable and challenges our infrastructure. So these are a myriad of factors that we think about as we consider our business, which should then bring the first polling question of the day. Jigger, if you would. All right, so thinking of those factors, we're going to ask you folks to respond with which of these are, in your world, the most significant external factors impacting your supply chain.
Do we choose one, or can we choose more than one?
A single one for today. What's top of mind? Awesome. We see our results rolling in. Fantastic. We've got a little over half of you responding. It looks like global supply chain disruptions leading the charge. Perhaps 5 more seconds, Jigger, and we'll close out.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the US presidential election is only 7% of participants, but I'm sure if you allow people to choose more than one, that would go up as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. So certainly global supply chain disruption. Who among us hasn't struggled with getting that material or securing the services that we need, be they abroad or what have you? So certainly can appreciate why that's top of mind for folks. Okay, Jigger, we'll move forward from there. Thank you, folks. Appreciate that. Inflation was already, oh yeah, it was second place, it looked. Okay. All right, moving right along. So those triggers for transformation I mentioned. So I love this quote. So this is a view I definitely hold. Transformation is not just a future event, is an ever-present activity. So each one of us should be looking forward to how we can improve on a daily basis, and really look forward to how we do that. But how would we want to do that? We would want that time and money were no object. We had endless amount of both to be able to scan the internal environment, absorb the information around how our company is performing, be it quarterly or annual, our town halls, and then we would want to marry that with our observations about our supply chain contributions to company performance. Are we making a difference in meeting our company objectives? And of course, we'd always want all the relevant information to make these assessments at our fingertips, and the skill sets within our company to help analyze that and put forward insightful influence into change. And so therefore, we would like to anticipate and routinely influence the change. However, the reality is that change is often a side of the desk exercise where perhaps we're looking at things on a periodic basis rather than routinely. We're often found to be too busy delivering the mail, and change oftentimes can be thrust upon us as a result. So in terms of reactive triggers, some of the things that will happen in our environment. So I once worked for a company where we had 3 CEO changes in the span of 4 years. And we had the mild-mannered, sort of warm, HR-oriented, really methodical leader, to the hard-driving leader that, execute at all costs and everything in between. So that had an impact on how we provided our services and supply chain. We look at the business objectives in our company. Are we subject to fiscal constraints? Are we battling inflation to keep our cost of goods down? We also look at, is our company one, perhaps like many oil and gas companies, where we try to minimize downtime, where it's so important to avoid disruption. So for supply chain, that becomes assuring supply as the order of the day, almost at all costs. In terms of rapid technology advancement, we don't go much further than thinking about AI, and certainly AI is top of mind for us. And when we look at what are the implications of AI in our business, one of the things I'm most excited about is the ability to take from our contracts and surface all of the obligations in our contracts, almost like on a program or project plan, to assign responsibilities and watch for people to actually do what they say they'll do. That's one aspect of AI. But we assume this is the wave that we don't want to miss. So technology advancements always top of mind. In terms of regulatory change, I know working for a client one day, we had this situation where the regulatory body said, hey, you're not well managing your subcontractors. And we were struggling with subcontractors bringing folks to sites and really being clear, did they have their safety qualifications and certifications? So we, in a hurry, had to deploy IS Networld. And for those of you familiar with it, you're aware that it's a third-party company that manages the safety, quality, and environmental aspects of businesses for us. So we deployed IS Networld in a hurry in order to meet our regulatory requirements. Mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, it can happen to the best of us anytime. I've worked with clients where they were recently sold from a parent company. They had 350 applications in their repertoire, and change was thrust upon them. All those applications are going away, including their contract lifecycle management tool. So we had to rapidly move forward to acquire technology with, I would say, a little less certain requirements than I'd be comfortable normally going to market with, but that's what happened. That same company 4 years later was looking to sell itself and divest into the market. And all of a sudden, we were looking at our technology and going, well, we shouldn't renew licenses. We should stop investing in upgrades and enhancements. So those all are things that we have to react to. In terms of proactive triggers, if we have organic innovation, we have keeners across the board in supply chain that are working within the field and always coming up with new and innovative ideas. So we can see that organic change. Or we have a continuous improvement culture where we're actually actively mining for, and we've got mechanisms to manage enhancement or improvement opportunities, perhaps bundle like together and move forward with periodic projects to help move the dial on what we do. Most exciting for me is when we have a supply chain leader that has a vision of where they want to go, how they want to optimize the supply chain services. They look at what types of areas are we in, perhaps beyond just procurement into all aspects of supply chain. So those are triggers that have us thinking about change. And as we are in that decision-making process, should we transform? Should we work forward to invest in technology, process optimization? We want to be crystal clear on the whys, and not just the whys of our supply chain, but as well cross-functionally. We would look out to other leaders in our organizations and understand their motivation for change. What areas do we mutually touch on, and how can we raise a business case together to move forward? So we want to collect these inputs into that business case. We want to take a baseline of where we're at today. We want to understand what are our organization capabilities? What is our staff development and education program? What are our org structures like? Do we have the proper functioning and reporting lines to deliver services both now and into the future? We need to understand our data and technology. What data are we collecting and at what cost? The more granular we get, the more we have to manage data integrity, data quality, and the effort of the practitioners in the field to input the data. And then policy and process. And for me, we can't lose sight of the fact that we have policies, be they legal, finance, as well as supply chain, that will impact the functioning of the supply chain service. So we're constantly on the lookout for how do we bring those in and improve them. So once we have our baseline, that is our floor to measure our progress as we move forward into transformation. And to do that, we clarify our immediate next steps. Where are we in our annual cycles? I'm imagining for most of us right now that our capital project planning, our operational budgets are all set for next year. So we have to consider that as we look to perhaps break into our budgeting cycle if we were to start today. We want to socialize some of the early insights for change, not just within our supply chain team, but within the other leaders and other practitioners throughout our cross-functional organizations. We need to understand the appetite for change. How much change has our organization taken on? Do we have change fatigue? Do we have the potential for competing priorities within our change? All of that brings us to polling question number 2. Jager, if you would, please. All right, folks, you'll have on the screen a question for you. Have you considered deploying or have you recently deployed new SEM technology? And if so, when so, and if not, perhaps not in the foreseeable future is how you'll answer.
Well, while we're waiting for the response there, Chris, I thought, the emphasis around really being crystal clear on the why is so important, right? And I love your slide around, okay, as part of that why, really understand what triggered this transformation, like, and understanding the triggers can I find in my experience can really help crystallize the why and articulating that and making sure that everything else sort of supports that why as you develop your strategy and execution plan as well.
Well said, sir. Couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's see our results.
Excellent. All right, folks. So many of us have completed a transformation and probably now consider how do we keep things fresh and anew. And in second place, well, tied for second, no one deploying in the foreseeable future, 8 of us, and I'm undergoing an implementation now. Good luck. You're on a great journey and I wish you well. And some are also considering technology into the future. So that helps us clarify, folks, who's in the room. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Jager. We can pull that down now. Looks like I can close it. Excellent. So moving forward, let's assume now that we've made that decision to transform. And if Alice in Wonderland has taught me anything, it's this. I love this quote. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. I use this with my 4 kids all of the time. So help them think forward to planning, really have a clear understanding of what's your destination, where do you want to be, what does good look like. And so for me, when we look at our supply chain service offering, I love it when we have supply chain leaders with a vision. I love it when our executive also have supply chain experience and understand why it's so important to have a vibrant supply chain. And as we consider this, we're looking at, do we have a procurement department or do we have a full service supply chain that may include logistics, transportation, warehouse, inventory, materials management? What are we trying to achieve? When do we look to achieve it? These form the basis for some of our early thoughts around our roadmap. When we went through this exercise with one client, it was very interesting for them to find out and surface that the central warehouse and the materials management team did not report up through supply chain. And that was blasphemy to many people in supply chain. So we made a case to bring materials management into the fold eventually. So surfaces some of the things you might not be crystal clear about, especially if you're a new leader in supply chain. We might be thinking about, okay, do we have strategic sourcing or category management, some of the advanced practices we have in supply chain? If we don't have it now, do we want it in the future? We start to think about that and become future-proof through our transformation planning. Do we have an asset management philosophy? This one's close to my heart, being an operations guy at heart, where within our company, that coalition of operations, maintenance, and supply chain, how do we look to deploy things like preventative maintenance programs into our asset base to keep our assets fresh, avoid disruption, et cetera? We want to make sure that whatever we do, we're connecting ourselves to our business needs and our company objectives. So when we move forward then into defining the transformation scope, where can we deploy technology? What are we looking to change about our service? I will constantly argue first things first. Let's think about supply or source to pay, pardon me. And just to ground us in what source to pay is, I think the one thing I always focus in is starting at how do we gather information about our suppliers? How do we bring together all of the disparate repositories of supplier information in our companies into one view? So supplier information moving forward, and how do we source into the marketplace? How are we evaluating, engaging our suppliers online, hopefully one day? Moving forward into contract authoring and contract award. Following that, the downstream procure to pay. How do our purchase side orders tether back to our contracts so we're all speaking the same language, giving the same instructions to our supplier? How do our practitioners in the field, our receivers, how do they know the purchases orders there, pardon me? How is it that they will receive goods and services that match our purchase orders, the three-way match that we're all striving for? Moving forward to invoicing, have been given proper instructions to our suppliers to invoice us correctly. Is our accounts payable department clear that they followed instructions and what some of the controls are being met are? And finally, they move forward to payment. I would argue the last step, closing out the entire spectrum. So when we close off a relationship, close off a contract, make sure our obligations are met, make sure there's no lagging payments. That for me is the complete cycle of source to pay. So clearly it's an impactful cross-functional scope where if we do this well, we establish credibility that we can do this and we can do more. It's sensitive third-party spend, it's money out the door, it's people spending their budget, very close to their heart. And I know in the end, one of the key outcomes of a source to pay project that I always like to emphasize with clients is establishing the business as contract owners. I know that's focusing on one record amongst it, but it's a pivot point around which all of this hangs. If we have our business proponents owning their contracts and we facilitate it for them, then we can clarify the lines of decision-making and change going forward. And I always like to have supply chain be the commercial conscience. We're the only group that cares from front to back how our commercial activity is being conducted. And we've got a line of sight on it also. Supply chain should be your commercial conscience. We have risk management considerations as well. We've talked about some of this already. We have new technologies to help us manage a more sustainable supply chain. We have tools that help us manage our corporate social responsibility. We can argue within our business case and on our roadmap that we can surface, here's how we are engaging and consulting with our Indigenous community, for example, and we can demonstrate our commitment to their economic development when we're enabled by the right technology. All of these come together to form our strategic roadmap, where once more, we're beginning with that end in mind. That's a common theme for me. We always want to be striving forward to the better day. So that roadmap forms, it becomes like your North Star. It's that constant guide in the sky that will help you navigate the journey that you're on as you move through your transformation, and will continually inform your decision-making. And business engagement is critical. That's another key theme for us. So when we're engaged with our business across the spectrum, we will get crystal clarity of our requirements and those of our collaborators in the source to pay process. Ideally, these are informed by well-formed process and policy, and we often don't want to take the time to optimize our processes, or at bare minimum capture what we do today. A saying that I have is process begets technology, technology informs process. So we can have clarity on what we do, but we can also learn from our software providers and implementers and modify slightly how we move forward. We want to incorporate, for me, collaborative controls. They're really important in terms of getting buy-in. So, if, for example, we're doing contract authoring, how are we folding in the requirements of the legal department to make sure we're using the proper terms and conditions? If we're helping to manage, and we are, financial approvals, and we want to differentiate that from the signing authority. So that often is a rub that people don't fully understand. So we want to have controls in place to make sure we respect our financial approval authority, and we have the right people signing off on the commitment to do work. The C-suite, definitely our senior leaders, all of them have to be strong, visible support. They can't just platoon in now and then, get a status report and say, hey, everything's going great. They have to be strong, visible leaders. They need to be ever present. They need to be interested. They need to be able to speak fluently on the why we're doing what we're doing, and also bring forward the proper messaging at the right time. Organizational change management, hugely important. Do you have org or OCM resources internally? Not every organization does. Can you acquire them externally? If so, they might form part of your business case. Ideally, they're internal. They're going to be the ones that are closest to being in tune with the fabric of the company, and you need in your project to know what's going on. Then those folks in the trenches, we can't forget them. Those are the ones that are most dramatically impacted by our change. We need to bring them along for the journey. One of the companies I worked for in the past had a group, and I'll forget the name exactly. I'm going to call them business change leaders for now. But 8 to 10 months ahead of our go live, when we were deploying technology and new processes, we brought them along to help articulate that strategic plan, help bring in information on really at a detailed level what's going on in the organization. Maybe one group would say, hey, we have a turnaround in October, don't go live then. Whatever it happened to be, we have our ear to the ground, we're listening, we're building relationships, and that's always super important. They also help us to iterate what we do as far as our deployment and our design. We want to do our homework. We'll move forward to that now. So we want to understand the technology trends. Great place to start is by talking with your IT team and understanding what is going on in their world. They have people that are in tune to the latest trends in technology. They'll understand if they have, a capability that we're not fully leveraging that could be fit for purpose for what we're doing. I remember one group we worked with had a sell side of the business in shipper services for pipeline. And they were moving forward to acquire a contract lifecycle management tool. And it was only from the insightful IT team that said, hey, wait a moment, we understand there's another group in supply chain supported by IT that has a full cycle source to pay tool, including contracts. Perhaps it'll work for them. So we were able to work together with IT and the shipper services team to say, hey, use this tool to help both support the buy side, but in addition, the sell side into the future. So keeping our application footprint down, really important to those in IT, as it should be for all of us. If you'd like to understand supply chain technologies, we know there's Gartner, Forrester. I don't know if people are as aware of Spend Matters, but they're experts in the field of source to pay. If you haven't met them, check out spendmatters.com. It'll be a very informative experience for you. You can talk to industry peers. Doesn't have to just be in the industry you're in. It could be parallel or sister. Often for oil and gas, we look to manufacturing. What technologies do they use? Are they part of user groups that perhaps, like for years, I was part of an SAP user group when I was in a company that had SAP. I helped form a user group for another technology. So we can be proactive to bring together users on the common issues of how do we keep these tools working for us. Of course, technology companies and implementers will be only too happy to meet with you and give you demos or have old discovery sessions. Be careful about the time suck, I'll say, as you move forward. They'll be very interested in maintaining relationships with you. And all of this should wind up in confirming your current understanding of your business requirements today and help you anticipate those future requirements. The one thing I can say, be crystal clear as you're documenting your requirements. Make sure that when you look at them again 3 to 6 months out, or when you're going to market, that you remember what you meant. Too often I have seen where someone documented a requirement, didn't properly describe it, and out into the future, they had no idea what they meant then. So let's make sure that we're look back proof. And then know what you don't know. So this will help the process of, be humble. We know that you're not going to have every answer, every question, but know good questions to ask. So as we move forward into demos and future engagements with the suppliers, we'll know.
Chris, I just have a quick question for you. Just
Please.
I love the statement there, you know, be in the trenches and really understand the requirements of those that are working with this every day. What's your guidance around what is the balance, right, between, you know, when I've been in there in the trenches, right, there's a resistance to change sometimes that says, hey, you know, this is what we need, and it's because we always need it, right? Versus this is where we have to change and transform how we process something, right? And so any word of guidance around, you know, what how do you maintain that balance? How do you listen but still move an organization forward as well?
I might often use the parallel of sometimes we put in contracts in place that will govern multiple business units, and sometimes what we try to do within a contract might conflict. One organization might get slightly worse pricing than they have, and so on. So it's similar to that, where you know some people resistant to change. Hey, we've always done this; it always works. But you try to start with looking, okay, we do have to look at the bigger picture. We're all here to support the organization's objectives. So there might be a little bit of give and take. So start by presenting some of those things after having listened to what their concerns are. But I think it's an iterative process that once they start seeing some of the plan unfold, they'll look forward to say, okay, I can understand why we're doing it. But you're not wrong that what's in it for me, how it will impact me is always ever present.
Yeah, and I think your statement earlier too would really help around really understand your North Star and what is the why of doing all this, right? And sometimes the why requires changes into the organization to do something differently as well. So, okay, super,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Okay, so when we now move forward into that business case, and some of this will be repeat, but this is where it all comes together. All is to put our best foot forward. And if we articulate that business necessity, we know what value we'll generate. We know what risks we're mitigating, pardon me. We know what good looks like, what our future state looks like. We want to state that vision. I find people really align with people who are passionate and clear on what that end game looks like. What does better look like, and how does it affect our investment decisions? How will I get that return on investment? There's numbers that can be put to any of this. I've had some people convince me of that, so we can do that at a level that's appropriate to convince the organization. So we'll incorporate the whys from all of the participating departments. Some of the classic benefits cited, we could rattle off a few of these. We know cost savings, process execution efficiencies, improved user experiences, and enhanced supplier relationships. But we want to go beyond the typical as well. We want to start to hint at some of those advanced things that we'll get to in due course, that ESG support that we've talked a bit about today. How do we be part of the management of supplier performance in a real way that helps the folks in the field in managing our capital projects? And when our suppliers need to improve, how do we hold them to account to make sure they do improve? And then we'll have those future data-driven insights and real decision-making power when we have some of the advanced spend analytics, et cetera. We want to balance the benefits that we espouse with the potential threats. We know this is a significant investment that's potentially disruptive to our organization. We may have adoption challenges, but let's go in anticipating that. You know, sometimes we prepare for the worst, but anticipate the best. And then if we highlight where we can mitigate risks, maybe we've got a lack of an audit trail through the entire thread. We can do things that improve visibility and show compliance. We can have visibility on our obligations, like I've told you. Really understand all parties, not just our supplier. We don't just hold their feet to fire. We're a party to a contract as well. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing. How do we avoid supplier payment issues? I know that we all get tackled with helping manage when things break down in our procure to pay processes. So let's try to be proactive and avoid them by having good, solid information through the spectrum. And I can't emphasize enough, don't oversell. I know there's some on the call that have been with me in journeys before, And I'm really cautious to when we talk about the benefits, provide ranges, really difficult to pin numbers. We have to have our potential things that we anticipate. Oh, what am I trying to say? Our assumptions is what I'm trying to say. I worked for a previous company where the spend was about $3 to $4 billion, and we circulated a benefit of $184 million within a short time frame. And everywhere we went, it was always about not all the, what are the benefits at a lower level? How happy are people? It's, have you achieved the $184 million savings? And so everywhere we went. So I'm scarred by that one, to mention what Alan said earlier. So I'm always cautious to not oversell. So launch. Now we have poll question number 3, Jigger, if you would. And so for you folks, what is the most challenging aspect of starting a supply chain technology initiative? Early lead on getting senior leaders buy-in. Finding a practical approach within our means is close side. Wow, very interesting. Senior leader buy-in, definitely in the front. Strongly coming in. Let's not go beyond our means to do this. We have day jobs, don't we? All right, maybe a couple more seconds, folks. All right, looks like the numbers are starting to come in. So definitely getting senior leader buy-in. I agree. It's tough sometimes. There's a lot on the plate of those leaders in our organization. To cut through the noise is sometimes a challenge. And then finding that practical approach. If I have just 2 people in the organization, how can I do that? How can I supplement what I have and do this in a very expedient manner? Okay, thanks, Jigger. All right, moving right along, team. Okay, so now we've got the buy-in. That was hard. Hey, we got all the money and funding we need. Now we're moving forward. So earlier we talked about how do we make sure the folks in the trenches are bought in. So I think the more that we communicate that strategy, that vision, keeping that end in mind. I know one thing we want to avoid, and I think this is where people have been bitten in the past. Just because we launch a technology, what's the old adage? If we put technology onto a bad process, it only makes it worse faster. How many of us have had leaders that have gone out to a conference and they return back to the office all jazzed about the latest technology and we must implement it? I'm here to tell you, just because you build it doesn't mean they will come. We have to be cautious. We have to be methodical. We have to be clear on why we're doing what we're doing. And I think, again, always grounded in clear process. So let's try to chew the elephant one bite at a time. We don't need to do everything all at once. We need thorough execution. We need to enable basic business activities first. And we have a logical implementation plan where hopefully we can get some early returns and keep building our credibility, trust in our relationships. This is where I don't know if I'm a bit controversial here, but this is where I've seen this work the best. So I'm always have a bias towards a execution model that is led by the supply chain. It's supply chain focused, knowing that we've got the best interest of the spectrum of where we work in mind. Excuse me. We do need IT and finance and legal. These are often the bedrock stakeholders in these initiatives. We need to collaborate with IT. We need to respect their change management and implementation protocols. We need to know them like the back of our hand. As well, we need to govern according to the supply chain processes and policies we have. I love it when we have an overall PM that is in the supply chain and we supplement with a vendor PM on the technical side. So an overall PM with a technical PM from the vendor and then supported by our IT and other practitioners. From a vendor management perspective, I argue supply chain does vendor management all the time. We're very clear on the commercial aspects of our relationships. We also understand how to motivate vendors to deliver on their requirements, and those requirements are largely supply chain focused. And then have our vendor, our IT group, hold the feet to the fire, and they know all of the infrastructure, cybersecurity, all of those aspects. So they'll make sure that those aspects are taken care of. Cross-functional benefits, I probably don't need to emphasize that again. We know that we're focused on that. That dedicated resources, we've talked about this is where, again, the preferred model, where we avoid people working off the side of the desk. They're seconded to a project. That's not always possible. A good alternative for that is to hire a supply chain consultant or a supply chain implementer that's very clear on the business of supply chain, not just a technical implementer. That can help supplement and tee things up for our supply chain team if they're forced to manage a day job as well. These implementers can be often a proxy for the supply chain, where they help with the daily execution and then keep the supply chain informed, but as well offer up decisions for the supply chain IT folks at the right times to make those decisions. Moving right along, project governance. So big fan of when we have co-sponsors, often the highest supply chain leader in the organization coupled with someone from legal, finance, or IT, especially if the part of the intent of the project is to further cement relationships in the organization. Really big fan of the supply chain IT combination. We have our typical measures of success in our budget and scope and progress. But if we're committed to developing policy, we'll be able to also report on progress with our policy development. I remember one client we were building both the policy in procurement and as well as a methods of payment policy for finance. So they controlled some of the, hey, here's when you can use this type of purchasing method, a credit card. So we had our hands in helping develop both, but they certainly needed to coexist. If we've identified processes, we can rightly show the progress on these processes from design through to implementation. And the biggest learning from working with my IT colleagues is a requirements traceability matrix. Might be a basic tool for many in IT. For a business person, this is just the be-all end-all Bible to document your requirements, have great descriptions, follow through the design, testing, and iteration of your project execution, and make sure that you get what you've asked for at the end of the day. And then we want to maintain clarity on the roles and responsibilities. What does supply chain do versus the vendor versus IT? I often argue process development can be done well with supply chain developing it, sometimes facilitated by process modeling folks. And in terms of approvals, making sure we're clear on who approves processes, who approves design at the right time and place. How are we doing for time, Alan?
We're down to 12:47, so we got 10 minutes or so left.
Okay, we'll roll forward. Next question, please, Jigger. Which of these source to pay improvements most interest you? Let's get a sense of what folks are thinking about, or what are some of the functions in source to pay that are important to you? We don't see, there's our first respondent.
Super. As we're waiting for the responses to come in, just a reminder to folks to put your questions into the Q&A functionality in Zoom, and we'll address those questions here shortly.
Excellent. Okay, we're seeing a little over half the respondents. And spend analytics reporting and dashboards is well out in front so far. Contract visibility and controlled access coming on strong late. Okay, Jagger, I think we can close off the poll now. Sorry, folks, if I missed the last one or two of you. So yes, the world is abuzz with what data and processing power can do for us now. And I think the supply chain's ability to connect the dots using solid reporting, show how it impacts our business and their objectives, I think is a great result there. So it's close to my heart as well, folks. So I agree with that. Thank you. Stop sharing that. All right, moving right along. So, oh, I'm sorry. I neglected to emphasize the criticality of change management. So you've certainly heard me go on about engagement of all source to pay stakeholders. The one thing I might say is that let's not forget the folks that are out in the field, those underappreciated stakeholders, those people in the trenches that are building the request, be it for a purchase order or a contract, those that have to receive information from suppliers on maybe a tattered LEM or work ticket in the field, and how does that relate back? So let's make sure we arm them with the right information as well. I've mentioned before, we can iterate our implementation based on what we learn as we go through the process. The project execution is a change exercise itself, so let's always be learning. And these tools are often misunderstood for their magnitude. They are ERP-like. You know, if we're both implementing an ERP and a source to pay, probably too many companies wouldn't do that, but they're large projects. Let's make sure we're committing the right time and resources. And we want to reinforce outcomes. You've heard me say it before, the business ownership. The business owns the budget, the financial decisions, the contracts, the scopes of work, and mobilizing suppliers. Supply chain as that commercial conscience. We care across the spectrum. We facilitate all of the activities. We monitor controls. We provide reporting, just like we said, and see that resonates with this group. We provide information. We provide insights. And that transition to operations, I'll speak a little bit more to in the next slides. Very important part. So these are an encapsulation of some of the hard-fought wins, those scars that Alan mentioned earlier, and some of this will be repeated, but I believe it's important so that getting that governance right, that process begets technology. We have to know daily what is the path, what are the activities we're looking to support. It's not inconceivable, we've heard of, where technology is just launched and it's better than what some companies have. Sometimes it's better than nothing, but if you are not careful, you can get caught in a trap of the technology driving nothingness. Those collaborative controls, adherence to payment terms, that request to award, how quickly are we at generating contracts? One that's close to my heart and is around evaluation criteria. Let's make sure that we, in our systems, can approve evaluation criteria. And then later, as our bids come in, we can segregate commercial versus technical evaluation so that we always remain at an unbiased situation when we assess a supplier's capabilities. The approvals we've talked briefly about. We once hired a large consulting firm in this company we had that took no less than 2 months to explore all of the approvals that we had in the system, whether they were embedded in an ERP, whether they were manual, and then unraveled all that and showed it to the leadership and said, you need to make this much less complex. So let's be clear on where approvals in our processes take place. Segregation of duty, let's make sure no one can ever put in a request, cut a purchase order, and receive. We all understand the importance of managing who can do what within our system, so let's automate that. Reporting, we've talked a lot about this. What do you want to report? I argue start with the basics. It's okay to be able to just simply show spend by contractor. We can start to compare forecasted values to committed costs to actuals in our reporting, working with our project controls, our cost management teams to start putting the layers of the onion together so we've got the complete picture. We can move to more specific reporting as we go, get into commodity spend across suppliers. We can look at rate comparisons. How much did I spend for a journeyman electrician here versus in supplier B and C, and so on. So more granularity, more effort, more data is being captured. Walk before you run. You've heard me say this a lot. So let's streamline and automate that basic activity. Let's stabilize and generate confidence. This is a big change. So let's really, less is more here. I believe, especially in early stages, can start to accelerate as we move forward. Some folks will consider, doing one-offs. Maybe they're doing that supplier information management module. Maybe we'll conduct later a one-off sourcing event where we have some friendly suppliers willing to work through us as we learn our technology. And that contract repository, or maybe we're conducting a negotiation and authoring event online. I mentioned the dedicated team. I won't say too much more about this, but I can't emphasize enough. If not fully seconded, at least a portion of your time, and maybe it marries to the goals and objectives of the individuals. That supply chain implementer consultant as a proxy for the business is always a good alternate route. And let's move forward. Data management, we've talked a lot about this. Know your wide-ranging data requirements. What's the magnitude? Do you have the right master data? When we envision what we want to report on, do we have the right locations? Do we have the right business units? Are we managing that down at a granular level with the master data around our services and materials? That'll help us later as we want to get more advanced reporting. The one thing I'll focus on here is contract data migration. This is for sure one of the most intense, tedious, and time-consuming aspects of any project. Surfacing all of the contracts in our business out of our drawers, out of our filing cabinets, and consuming it, coalescing it, putting metadata to it, and ultimately getting into a repository. But we saw earlier with this group, very important for that visibility and control access. And we want to minimize organization disruption. We want to be acutely aware of what's going on in our company. What are all the different initiatives? How are we managing it? Can we chew off some pilot projects and show some early returns, get some confidence up, get the buzz going? Things are often very important to do. And we can work systems in parallel for a short time. There's a risk of sort of duplicating effort, but before we completely close off the systems we're reliant on, let's make sure we have some airtime with the new systems. All right, and lastly, that transition to operations. So we want to make sure that people are being communicated to. That earlier change management, that change leader network, they're now out there leading the charge, communicating what's important to each of the different business elements. I love to see education led by the business. Supply chain people teaching supply chain, accounts payable teaching accounts payable. Let's enable some of these practitioners that are right in the trenches with the folks to be able to train them. The support model going forward, build every day towards this. With these tools, I'm a firm believer as an expert system, we can manage the frontline support right within the supply chain. We can answer every how-to question. We can tackle some basic technical configuration even. I know that's blasphemy to some, but it has happened. I've seen it. I support it. But as well, when we start to encounter technical issues that are too much for a business person, we have our friends in IT right there with us to help troubleshoot. Vendor management going forward, have a line of sight on how you'll manage that supplier relationship, who is going to be communicating enhancements and decisions on new features coming. The technical patches and change management, we have to be so solid and embedded with IT that we do this right. Planning resources of future upgrades and enhancements is also great.
Chris, just sorry to interrupt, but we've got maybe 2 minutes to wrap up. I think you've got a really good final slide there as a call to action.
Okay. Shall we skip the polling question for now, Alan?
Yeah, let's skip the polling question.
And I'll move forward to the takeaways. And of course, folks, you'll get all of the final documentation sent out to you. So remember, your vision is your North Star. Policy and process first, business engagement, manage change well, remain humble, that SCM-led project execution, and a reminder, sometimes you have to go fast or slow to go fast. Alan, let's turn it over to you, my friend.
Yeah, some really good takeaways there, and maybe with the last minute or so, let's address some of the questions from the audience. So one question from Roma was around just the development of the business case. So a true so the question is a true total cost of ownership over the life cycle of the application in putting that together the business case. In your experience, do you see this being done well upfront? Which includes there's a question in there around the ongoing sustainment costs that are being captured in that business case as well. So maybe if you can reflect on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't often see it done well because I think we overpromise. We're so jazzed up to go out and build the business case that we make it look as flowery as possible. So I think we have to be cautious in stating definitive numbers back to those ranges. We can gather all of the information, all of the data, and put a package together. We can anticipate that some of our suppliers will be raising their costs into the future, so we can put sort of barometer on what that looks like. We can fold it all in and make a reasonable effort at a total cost of ownership, but it's not always palatable. Let's say these tools can look expensive if you're not taking a cautious approach.
Great. And similarly, I've seen that as well. And some of the challenges is around really understanding that cost, right? And how do you get the intelligence to bring that cost in? Because oftentimes when an organization embarks on this, it's a new journey for them, right? And so I think much of what you share today, bringing in the experts, bringing in the outside support and perspective, getting the business unit to participate, those in the trenches will help you articulate and define some of those costs going in, understanding that the total cost of ownership as well.
Yeah, and one quick warning, the first year subscription of a SaaS tool is often something you can capitalize and make part of the IT project. So just be cautious for when the timing of those first year subscriptions come to pass.
Absolutely. Okay, with that, we're at the top of the hour, and so I want to thank everyone for their participation today at our webinar. And Chris, thank you for the guidance and insights shared. As a reminder to everyone, we will share the presentation and the recording with you shortly after this webinar, and I want to wish everyone a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Super. We'll wait until everyone comes off, and we'll do a little bit of a brief debrief then.
Shall we pause recording, Jigger?